there have and work on a high-profile game with incredible amount of creative latitude, much more so, I think, than some other industries now. So don't dismiss that as a way to get in, because even as a musician, you could still end up playing on records and doing things beyond what you may think is the traditional path.
Thank you, Dave. Donna.
This might be an appropriate time to bring up work ethic, because we've talked about passion, we've talked about education to some extent, but in networking, I agree, is extremely important. We talk. So if you come and work for me and then Wesley asks me about you later, I'm going to give him an honest assessment of, yes, did the person show up on time? Did he or she work well and hard? I think probably also you would hear from all of us up here that this is not an industry for clock watchers. So if you've been told to show up at 8 o'clock and you walk in at 7:59, unless you're Mick Jagger, I think Mick Jagger could get away with that. But, and then you're looking at the clock and expecting to walk out at 5 p.m., you're probably in the wrong industry. So it's an industry where you almost can say the sky is the limit. You can go as far as you can take yourself. However, that does mean that you're going to need to work hard, keep learning. Don't ever think you know everything, and don't expect to start at the top. Because if you come to my facility, you're going to start as an intern, and you're going to work your way up. Also, don't expect to use the latest equipment, depending upon where you go. Like Wesley was saying about his friend who was volunteering at open mic nights in coffee shops. You're not always going to get to work with the latest digital Pro Tools or whatever, or digital sound console. So it is good to know as much about analog equipment as possible, and be willing to pitch in.
Rob.
One of the things that I've run into in the business is people who pigeonhole themselves a lot, at least in the technical side of theater, by saying that, oh, I'm the sound guy, or I only mix bands, or I'm the lighting guy. As far as our side of the industry goes, the people who work are the people who know the most. Because one day you're a lighting person, the next day you're running mic cables for a band, the next day you're a monitor engineer. So if you pigeonhole yourself and just focus on one thing, you may become incredible at that one thing, but there are very few people who get to do that one thing all the time. So if you're looking for more maybe stability in the industry, I'd say learn as much as you can about every aspect of that, of the business that you can.
Mario.
One of the things I want to share with you guys too is that for me, the possibilities are really endless. Opportunity is out there. One of my personal experiences that I can share with you guys that I think has made my career really exciting is that in a very short span, I went from being the trumpet player with Ricky Martin, coming home doing a TV show, performing with Barry Manilow, going back out with Christina Aguilera. So I've had this really interesting array of different types of artists that I've worked with. And again, keeping an open mind is what's going to open those doors also. Approaching things with that sense of having those senses on that you're able to do, diversify your styles in what you play in. And that to me has again led to some really exciting moments in my career. Even to today where I can come here and share my experience and direct an orchestra here at the college. And as of yesterday, I got called to contract musicians for the Playboy Jazz Festival in June at the Hollywood Bowl, and I'll be performing there too. So again, it's a really, there's no real, like you were saying, not pigeonholing yourself into being one type of musician or just being into one aspect of the industry, and also being able to turn around and mix and produce and be an asset on the technical side too. It's very exciting. It's very exciting, and that's one of the beauties about this, about being in our industry, is that I think all these panelists can attest to that. That's what makes our industry exciting, is that it's never the same. There's no redundancy in our career. So it's very dynamic. But again, the way those you're going to make a career to be one of those types of careers, that you got to be open-minded, be diverse, and just have those sensors always on.
I have to ask a question right here that I think is kind of looming around many of these comments, and it had to do with stability. You're talking about being flexible, being able to do all these other jobs. What do you say to somebody who is a 9-to-5 person that needs regularity in their life? Their socks are organized in their drawer, their t-shirts are hung up on hangers. They expect something to happen because they have a preconception about things. How are they going to survive in this industry?
They won't.
It sounds like it's unpredictable. How are they going to make
Become an accountant, I would suggest. I don't know.
You can do tech work. You can be, wiring up racks for permanent installations is very uniform. It's very methodical. If you're wiring up patch bays that are 100 lines, 152 lines,
It's a glorified electrician, though, really, isn't it?
well, it's the music business, and you can transpose that over to doing live gigs and doing mobile recording or whatever. So I think that, and that is a 9-to-5 business in a lot of sense of what it is. So if that interests you, and if that's who you are, that I think, in my personal opinion, I think that if you're going to be a producer, engineer, musician, those are the basics of what we do anyway. So you should be learning that skill regardless. If you are an engineer and you walk into some studio and there's a piece of gear that goes out, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to pull that piece of gear out and replace it. Or you got a band in there and an artist in there looking for you to run the session, and you can't because it's not patched right. That doesn't fly.
So there is room for the predictability of
Yeah.
a lifestyle here. Doug, and then Donna, please.
Okay.
Go ahead, Doug.
Thank you. I'd like to offer you an answer. There's a young lady, we're both young, sitting over there, and her name is Mary Ann. Now, she's like 7 to 11 o'clock worker, non-stop. I'm the kind of guy that goes out and I fly by what an instinct I have. I record whatever I feel like I should record. He'll tell you, I was the first one to pick them up off the streets and record them.
The Mystic Knights of the Go Boy.
Exactly. So I always need a constant supply of money because I can't be bothered where it comes from. If you're going to be artistic, and producing is a form of artistry. I mean, I spent 12 years of classic piano in order to join a rock and roll band, so that tells you, doesn't matter what you start out, it's where you're feeling, where you end up. She's a whiz at getting money from distributors, record stores, and people who owe me money all over the world in royalties, and that is a 9-to-5 person. You cannot do it alone if you're going to be a success. You've got to have a retinue behind you. If you're going on stage, okay, you have 80 people. I only need 2, one for the money and one to keep track of where I am. That's it.
Wonderful, wonderful advice. Donna, please.
I think it's been stated, but just to go back to the regular time, hours and such. And actually, I'm married to somebody who used to be a professional union stagehand, and he couldn't handle the hours, and so he's now an ex-professional stagehand because he wanted the same office to go to. He wanted to have regular hours, and you just don't get that in the tech world. I just wanted to also make a point that. Our hours are wacky where we work. We can work any day of the week, holidays, New Year's, 4th of July, any time of the week. 16-hour days are not unusual. And we even go up to 18, 20, 21-hour days sometimes. But it can get even wackier. So if you look at my hours and decide that's too normal for you, there's the other extreme too. So again, the music industry can encompass and you can make it. You could almost write your own job description at times. So if you want something even wackier, believe me, there are more extreme jobs out there.
This seems like an elusive, exclusive lifestyle. People have to earn a living. How are they going to break into this lifestyle if they have to earn a living in the meanwhile, but yet they want to get their foot in the door, what is available to them? I mean, they need to keep a roof over their heads. They need to keep their payments done. Jenny.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Amaya. I stepped up here a little bit late. I'm an associate faculty member here at Miracosta. My upbringing, I would say, in the industry, I actually started as a product rep. In a weird sort of way, I was picked up by a music notation company because I had done some notation work and won some awards. And I was 17 years old, so I was very young. And I started working NAMM shows. I loved it. Somebody was talking earlier about, if it's your passion, you can make it work. And I didn't know what work ethic was or anything at that time. I was very young. And it turned into something I just kept doing. And I kept working for companies at NAMM shows. And when I got older and I had a bachelor's degree in music, I started getting work that way. I would meet people and they would hire me, and I started getting really, really good work out of it, working for cruise lines, doing notation. This is another industry, by the way, that we don't think of very often. There are people that need to notate music. I got to the point, it gets to the point where you think you don't know where you're heading, and you think, this is a hard lifestyle. There are times when you don't have any work maybe coming in, and you're trying to support yourself, especially like most of you are going through school. And for me, it just kept happening. And I think if you keep your eye focused on what your passion is, and you just keep trying, weird things happen. You create your niche, and it happened for me, and I want you to know that. And I'm up here on this panel today with some amazing, amazing people, and I can't even believe I'm sitting here today. If I look back on where I came from, I'm an accordion player, I'm a band geek and a notation nerd.
You never mentioned the accordion, Christy.
And and I've had just an amazing life. The product rep side of this, I was a freelance product rep, and I was sent around the nation. There were times when I was finishing my master's degree that I was gone for a month at a time, and I was doing, clinics and demonstrations and product training, and I developed my own business, and I started, I've got so many clients now, I need some people that know notation to help me out. But there are gonna be times when it's slow though, and that's the hard part about this. There are going to be times when the work is flowing in and you're loving it, and the hours don't even matter. When, like I said, I was gone for months at a time away from my husband, and it didn't matter because I was loving what I was doing. But then you come home after that month, and then you have this month of nothing. And that was the hard part for me. It wasn't as much the crazy hours as it was just this erratic, you're employed and then you're not employed sort of thing. And you have to be ready for that. You have to have thick skin for that. But you can do it. You go through this drought period, and then all of a sudden you're busy again. So just hang in there.
You don't have to do this full time. This can be a part-time job. If it's something that's your passion, a lot of us call it supporting our habit. We go do something else so we can do this, or while you work on your skills. I was at a dinner the other night, and I'm sitting next to this guy, and we're talking music and talking music and talking music. I said, well, what do you play? He says, oh, I'm a bass player. He says, I'm a doctor during the day, but I'm really a bass player. And that's how he thought of himself. So it may be something where you're going to have a different occupation during the day. I play gigs with guys who are policemen and who work here or there, accountants and stuff, but they think of themselves as musicians, and it's a very rich life for them. So you could be in the recording industry part-time and do other things. You could actually have a family, have relationships, and still get a great deal of satisfaction out of the fact that you produce music and you go out and play from time to time, and that you could create, dare I say it, a balance in your life.
Thank you very much. The secret word, balance. We're here united for one cause, music. We all love music. How much do we have to know about it? How much do we have to know about what people did before us? How important is a traditional music education? Laura.
Well, I would say on one hand, as much as possible, but then I would say on the other hand, I've worked with some composers who are now really big composers who knew very little about anything, but they had their niche, they had their talent, they were either good good programmers and could plink around, couldn't read music, couldn't notate, couldn't do anything, and that's where everyone here could come into play because you could do that all for them. They hired teams of people. So in an ideal world, I don't think you can ever know enough. But to survive, and unfortunately or fortunately, you could probably know very little, right?
Yeah. I wish that was the case for me. I needed a lot of training.
Yeah, me too.
Chris.
Well, I think that, like anything else, when you say maybe a formal education, as in going to school, getting degrees, or just simply obtaining an education somehow, a lot of these composers that you're talking about, they know what they're doing somehow. Maybe it was self-taught, maybe it was just through trial and error. When I was learning acoustics, we didn't have the internet, so I used to call libraries and ask if they had certain books, and I'd drive all over the state so that I could study about acoustics because I really wanted it. I think that with music, I had some formal music training, and I was a session player for a lot of years, but most of it I learned from taking whatever I learned in school, whatever I learned from other players, and really what I learned from myself by just experimenting. And I think that the experimentation aspect of this entire industry it's the creative aspect that we can't overlook. And I think schooling sort of sets you on course for that, but it's really what you're going to get from inside in your own experimenting and your own creative spirit and your own ability to express what's inside of you. The education and the formal training are tools that might help you to articulate that better, but it really comes down to finding your own voice, and whether it's you can read music or whether you play by ear or a little bit of both. I think that learning can come from a lot of places.
Thank you, Vikas, and then we'll go to Jeff, and then we'll go to Jenny.
I think if somehow you land in a position on a treasure box by chance, you're very lucky. But from my experience, I would never advise someone to do something if they're not willing to work hard at it. And that means if you have a passion and a love for it and you want to do it professionally, you should know as much about everything that relates to that thing as possible, because the world is large and it's as global, people are flying across and running internet and this and that. So there's always someone 10 to 100 steps ahead of you. Don't enter the industry if you're not willing to do the research and the backup and learn everything about your trade, whether you're making tires for a car or you're in the music industry. That would be my advice, seeing and being around people. So if you're looking for the easy shortcut, there's very few that exist. I think once you get a taste of one shortcut, you wish for another, but there are very few shortcuts.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, and I also think just as a musician, you can't do yourself a better favor than to learn more about music and learn to express yourself better. I mean, when I was a kid, if we weren't exposed, if I hadn't been exposed, I happened to live near the Lighthouse, a famous jazz club in Hermosa Beach, and I was listening to all the stuff everybody else was listening to on the radio. And then I walk by the Lighthouse, and I hear George Benson, or I heard Wes Montgomery. I heard all kinds of great players. I'm a guitar player, and I thought, wow, you could do that. And then someone gave me a record of a Segovia record. I went to a Segovia concert when I was like 11 years old. I said, wow, you could do that. So I ended up having a career where I made a lot of records for Concord Jazz in the jazz world. And they were actually successful for Concord, but in the jazz world, that's not very many records. But because I could play pretty much anything in just about any style, somebody asked me on the side to play a record. A guy who was a sideman in my band was making a new age record. And he said, well, would you go in and do this? Whatever you do, don't play with very much expression. Don't play too many notes. Don't play, just play it as straight as you possibly can. And I went in there and played for this record producer, and I played, it had music in front of me, and I'm playing the simplest thing as straight as I could play it, and I'm thinking, this is, ridiculous. The guy's going to think it's off. I can see him shaking his head in there. And after we finished the session, the guy says, the problem was I played it with too much expression. I put some vibrato on it or something, so I tried to play it as straight as I could. By the end of the record, it was just me and this piano player. By the end of the record, we had worked our way into being kind of artsy and getting a little bit of our creativity in there. The record sold 600,000 copies, more than all my other records combined. So just the fact that, and then we went on a tour. We went on tour in Asia after we'd sold a few million records. We went on a tour in Asia, played 3 concerts that took in $1 million. 3 concerts in Asia that took in $1 million, and I saw almost $500 myself, which was great. Just being open, being able to do as much as you can, and then being open to every opportunity. You never know where the money's going to come from.
It sounds like there were other people involved in your project.
Oh, yeah.
That's where the money went.
Yeah. Well, everybody here probably knows where the money went, but I agreed. I agreed to my fee, and we know what we're going to get paid before we get on an airplane, and it's in an escrow account, and this is what you're getting paid, which I thought was really great, until I got to these venues and saw that we were selling out these huge venues, and we did one with a symphony orchestra. We sold out the venue, and people were paying $200 for seats and stuff. I'm thinking, and that's what I got, Yeah,
Jeff, what's New Age for sucker?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, the reason we actually did it under a phony name because we were like kind of semi jazz snobs, and so we didn't actually call it New Age. We called it Newage.
Newage.
But it's very sincere music, and it sounds pretty, and there's nothing wrong with it, and it makes a lot of money.
Very, very nice. Jenny.
I think the question that you all need to ask yourself is, what kind of musician do you want to be? And that's pretty much what it comes down to. And most of you would probably say, I'm the thirsty for knowledge type. I want to know everything there is to know. And I was that type, or I am that type, I should say. And the flip side of that is that there's a point where you have to say, I know enough and I'm ready. And I'm ready to do this. So, learn what you need to learn, but then don't stick with that. There's a point where you're going to know what you need to know, and you need to just jump in.
Can I add something? An entrepreneur once said, it was the founder of MP3.com, that entrepreneurs build their parachute after they jump out of the airplane. And I kind of want to echo that. We talk about preparation and things, and for better or for worse, if you're offered a job, make sure you're not so in over your head that you're going to tear the project down. But if you can get by, do it. Sometimes I've offered a job to people. Sometimes when the person is offering you the job, they know that you are not completely qualified, but they see something, and they know in the back of their head that, they're going to keep their eye on you, and they're going to pull you along, and they're offering it to you. And I have students saying, no, I just can't do that. And I'm thinking, okay, next. And so something's comes your way, just grab it. And I just want to make one more point on the music knowledge, because I am a teacher, and I teach, over 200 students a year, and a lot of the students who don't have musical background get really excited with programs like Reason, where they can produce something that sounds kind of good, pretty good, without any musical background. You'll drive a car better if you know how it's built. So if you're thinking of a profession, what you think sounds good is okay, but on the professional level, when someone with the musical background and the history takes hold of your tools, which they will, they're gonna outshoot you. There's no way you can compete with someone who has that background most of the time. There's always exceptions.
John, please.
Yeah, a slightly different take on the whole idea of having knowledge. You kind of gain it as you develop as a musician anyway, I feel, whether you want to or not. It just soaks into you. I did 4 years training with a guy called Ike Isaacs in London, one of the great bebop jazz guitar players, kind of unheralded, but was a fabulous musician. Never really got to use that skill. I found I got these gigs being a rock guy. I was on tour with a lot of rock bands, and you made a ton of money, had a great life, but I've always craved the jazz thing, and I still aim to get back into it if I don't run out of time. But there was a great story about Django Reinhardt, and for those that aren't familiar with Django, he was a jazz player from the 30s through the 50s. He died quite young. He had a disability where he only really had 2 active fingers on his left hand. The others were damaged in the fire. And if you ever get to listen to Django Reinhardt's music, he worked with a guy called Stefan Grappelli, a great jazz violinist. And they got him to the States eventually, in his early 50s, when he was playing electric guitar. And he got a gig with the Count Basie Orchestra. And he came up to him and said, Django, we're going to play this song. He goes, okay, great. He goes, what key you playing? He goes, I don't know any keys, just start playing and I'll play. The guy had absolutely no musical knowledge whatsoever, but he was truly one of the greats of any form of music that's ever been on the planet. So I would suggest that as much as learning is a fabulous thing, and I applaud it, and I insist on it if ever I'm giving people guitar lessons, but the heart and the passion and the soul should not be ignored either in music. You know, we're a very technologically based age now, but there's a lot more to it than just the technology.
Talent.
Christy, could I just
So
add one thing? I was doing a film scoring session for 20th Century Fox, and before we started, I noticed the trumpet players in the trumpet section, this full orchestra, had their heads together, and they're looking at this music, and they're looking back and forth, and they're marking stuff up. Now, we hadn't played a note yet, and I mean, I'm going, what are they doing with this music? And we finished the session, and they went up to the arranger, and they said, we found some mistakes in the part. We went ahead and fixed it. Now, who are you going to hire back? Somebody who's a great player? Now, this is top, making a lot of money, people. Who are you going to hire back? Somebody who's a great player, or somebody who's a great player that makes your job easier? You know, there's probably spending $10,000 every 10 minutes for all these people to be in there. Somebody with the knowledge and the theoretical. That's why I would hire somebody like Mario, who's a writer and a composer, who can look at something and say, okay, this isn't going to work, and fix the problem without taking up any time in the session. So there is, depending on the venues, I forget your name, but this one young woman said way down there on the end, you have to decide what it is you're going to do, and then decide what skill set you have to make that work, and also look at who your competition is. Because we used to say in Los Angeles, somebody comes in and thinks they're all that, we used to say, well, we'll let them starve for a year, and then they'll come back with a better attitude. Because for every job like that, there's 10 people just as good as you in line want to have that gig.
Wes.
I was just going to say one of the best things I ever heard is that, you know, everybody says music is a language, and I think that's totally true. And if it is a language, why would you not want your vocabulary to be as extensive as it possibly could be? You know, obviously, you want to know everything that you possibly can. Maybe